The first thing you have to realize that odor production is a function of the volatility of any material. What comes off of that thing or that being has a certain degree of volatility and things that make it unique. And we harness that volatility, that tendency for it to change its form and degrade, to oxidize in many cases, is harnessed. Because when that happens, there are changes, and then that allows us to detect it. And because things are volatile, they want to grab onto oxygen molecules as they go by, as to the gases that go by them. And there's where the magic happens. That's what we take advantage of. Now, when we talk about scent versus odor, again, odor comes from inanimate objects, explosives, guns, drugs, you name it, gas that we use for gas leak detection. It could be the gas in a pipeline. There are all sorts of inanimate things that dogs can smell from a distance. And that's what we're harnessing when we're talking about odor. Now, a subclass of odor are the things that come off of animate objects, things that are alive, things that move, dogs, cats, people, but even bacteria and bed bugs and things like that all produce a scent that a dog can detect. And that scent shares some characteristics with the odor coming off of the inanimates. In other words, it's about how they interact with the air and get carried from there. So, that being said, let's talk about those shed molecules. Basically, when a substance is sitting there and it comes in contact with another substance, there's a transference of material between the two. They call that Locard's principle, that anytime two materials come in contact with each other, there's a transference of matter between them. Now, at the time the principle was first discussed, they were talking about physical things that you could touch and manipulate, objects. But what we know now, Locard's principle still applies to gases moving past an object, and particularly the air. And the air moving past something grabs molecules and carries them out in there. And essentially, in any contained vessel, any closed system, that air is looking for a point of homeostasis where the object or the animal can't release anymore. And then everything kind of stays pretty stable for a bit until something changes. Movement happens, and that can create turbulence that can move it. A door can open, a window can open, things like that in there. But the whole point of this diffusion is as things move away from the source, they tend to become more diffuse. They tend to become weaker and spread more broadly. But close, they're concentrated with a more narrow gradient. Makes the hot-cold game that dogs play when they're doing detection a lot easier. Okay, now moving on. As you take a look at the top of this thing, take a look at that yellow dot. At the top right of the screen, you'll see that the yellow dot is essentially a scent source. And we've all grown up with the idea of a scent cone. I remember I was first taught this when I went to my first dog school for the U.S. Army in 1975, Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, in the middle of summer, hot as all get out. But they talked about the scent cone and about how dogs behave in the scent cone. And for years, I talked about scent cones. But the reality is there's one trouble with that language. A cone implies uniformity. It implies a geometric shape, this thing that starts narrow and tapers out wide in a even fashion. But that's not the way it actually works. Actually, it's an odor plume. And if you take a look at a plume, it's like smoke coming out of a chimney. It comes out of a narrow source out of the chimney. And then as it gets in contact with the air, it starts to billow and widen and flow. And you'll see it go ahead and, get lighter and harder to see until eventually you're not even aware it's there. But coming out of the chimney, it's still concentrated. So that's one analogy. But it's also, if you want to look at it another way, it's like water moving on a stream or in a river. And if you see that water's flowing smoothly, and then you put a rock in the middle of that stream, you create turbulence, and you can see the swirls and eddies that are going on there on the bottom of the surface, because the surface is irregular, but the bottom of the stream is probably irregular. And you'll see currents and eddies there that you may not really be able to see on the surface, but they're there. And that's what we have to realize that we're dealing with when we're talking about odor production and the way it gets moved.
This video was brought to you by the United States Police Canine Association. If you found this information helpful, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next video. For more information, check out our website, www.uspcak9.com and at uspcak9. Thank you for watching and stay safe.